Whittaker Chambers was an American who spied on behalf of the Soviet Union during the 1920s and 30s. He stunned the world after he abandoned communism and outed Alger Hiss, a high-level U.S. government official who was a communist agent. What made Whittaker Chambers abandon communism? Well, it was a newfound belief in God, given that Soviet communism was against religion and was totally atheistic. So what made him start believing in God? His daughter's ear. Let me explain. He wrote in his book, Witness, "My daughter was in her high chair. My eyes came to rest on the delicate convolutions of her ear, those intricate, perfect ears. The thought passed through my mind, no, those ears were not created by any chance coming together of atoms in nature. They could have been created only by immense design. The thought was involuntary and unwanted. I crowded it out of my mind, but I never wholly forgot the occasion." To Whittaker Chambers, his daughter's ear was evidence of God's handiwork. Such compelling evidence that it prompted him to believe in God, become a Christian, and abandon communism. I'm not so easily convinced that the human ear was directly designed by God. I've always assumed that evolution designed it. That's the consensus in this day and age. Everything can be explained by science, or so it seems. Back in pre-modern times, people attributed unexplainable or seemingly miraculous things to God or gods. They didn't have the concept of evolution or chemistry to explain life and the origin of life. Then, beginning around the age of the Enlightenment, in the 1700s, people began to question the church and the Bible in terms of explaining the natural world, and instead used science to do so. So now science explains everything. Or does it? Actually, things are coming full circle. Science has progressed so much that we're finding out extraordinary things about the natural world that science can't seem to explain. It's really intriguing stuff. The deeper you delve into the science of it, it seems, at least to me, that a super-intellect was involved in not only the creation of the universe, but of biological life. Before I get into the details of that, let me say that these sorts of scientific discoveries, or should I say scientific inferences, to which I'm referring certainly aren't required to form the basis of one's faith in God. After all, billions of people are and have been strong believers, even though they've never heard of such scientific developments. And should scientists sometime down the road produce convincing evidence that the universe and or biological life originated through purely physical processes, which is highly unlikely in my view, then that should by no means shake one's faith in God. But still, for believers and non-believers alike, these developments in the world of science are really, really intriguing. One of those developments involves what they're finding out about the Big Bang and how exquisitely fine-tuned it had to be in order to produce a physical universe that can support life. To be sure, let me put to rest the notion that the Big Bang is just a theory. Physicists, astronomers, and cosmologists now almost universally agree that the universe started 13.7 billion years ago with the Big Bang. And there's plenty of evidence to back that up, including Edwin Hubble's discovery 90 years ago that the universe is expanding, and Penzias and Wilson's discovery 50 years ago of the cosmic microwave background radiation, or CMBR, which scientists think only could have come from the Big Bang. Prior to the Big Bang theory, scientists from Newton to Einstein accepted the so-called steady-state theory, in which they thought the universe always existed and was infinite. That theory clashed with the biblical account that the universe had a beginning. But with the confirmation of the Big Bang, evidence was overwhelming that the universe actually did have a beginning, just as was stated in the Bible. Robert Jastrow was a renowned astrophysicist who called himself an agnostic, but who struggled with that agnosticism. Let me read you some quotes from him. Now we see the astronomical evidence that supports the biblical view of the origin of the world. The details differ, but the essential elements in the astronomical and biblical accounts of Genesis are the same. The chain of events leading to man commenced suddenly and sharply at a definite moment in time, in a flash of light and energy. Now here's another quote from him. For the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountain of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. And one final quote from Robert Jastrow. That there are what I or anyone would call supernatural forces at work now, I think, is a scientifically proven fact. But what I found most extraordinary about the Big Bang is the incredible fine-tuning that went on. Scientists discovered that the rate of expansion during the first seconds of the Big Bang was so finely tuned that had that rate been 1/quintillionth of a second slower or faster, the universe either would have collapsed in on itself into a black hole or expanded too rapidly for stars and planets to form. And the rate of expansion was just one of many factors that had to be exquisitely exact in order for the universe to develop and life to eventually form. Physics expert and Catholic priest Robert Spitzer, in this disc, which is available through Lighthouse Catholic Media, discusses some of these factors. One is that you need to have a so-called low entropy universe. The odds of this happening as a result of the Big Bang is on the order of 1 in 10 raised to the 10 raised to the 123rd, which is 1 with either hundreds or thousands of zeros after it. And for all practical purposes, that's infinitely remote, an infinitely remote chance of that happening. Other factors that had to be finely tuned include our physical constants, or our laws of physics. They include the force of gravity, the speed of light, the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, and the electromagnetic force, which holds molecules together. The value of these constants could have been anything as the result of the Big Bang, but they just happened to be the exact amount in order for life to develop. It's truly extraordinary that all of these laws of physics happen to be exactly right for life to develop. That this happened by chance, to take an oft-used analogy, is like saying a monkey can type the entire corpus of Shakespeare in 2 weeks just by randomly tapping the keys. Of course, that's highly, highly unlikely, essentially impossible. The obvious conclusion is that there had to have been a super-intellect, i.e. God, who designed the Big Bang. Sir Fred Hoyle is a famous scientist who went from atheism to theism after finding that something called resonance levels in chemistry had to be an exact amount in order to have carbon bonding. Achieving that amount was highly, highly improbable through random chance. Hoyle compared the development of life in the universe by pure chance to a tornado sweeping through a junkyard and assembling a 747 ready for flight, and I may add, complete with the Boeing logo painted on. Most scientists acknowledge this fine-tuning of the universe, and to come up with a natural as opposed to supernatural explanation, they've proposed the multiverse hypothesis, in which ours is one of zillions of universes. Their reasoning is that if you have enough universes popping into existence, then there's a chance that among the quadrillions and quadrillions of bubble universes, each with different laws of physics, then one of them may just happen to have the right laws of physics suitable for life. But that theory is speculative. And as physicist Paul Davies quipped, to invoke an infinity of other universes to explain one is surely carrying excess baggage to cosmic extremes. And besides, a multiverse would need a creator too. So the field of cosmology reveals strong circumstantial evidence of God. There's strong circumstantial evidence of God in the field of biology as well. Now, to be sure, I'm no scientist. I was a history major and then I studied economics after that. But I've been reading lately a lot about biology. And the more I learn about it, the more fascinated I become with the amazing biological processes that go on within the cell. It's truly stunning. especially with regard to DNA and cell replication. Now, to get a flavor for what I'm talking about, you can see a great 5-minute animation of what goes on inside the cell at www.unlockingthemysteryoflife.com. That's unlockingthemysteryoflife.com. Think of a factory, such as a snack cake factory, or a bubblegum factory, or a paper factory, and the complex automated processes used to mass produce those products. Human ingenuity is truly amazing. Well, those complex automated processes that humans set up pale in comparison to the complex automated processes that go on inside the cell, especially with regard to DNA and cell replication. So you mean to tell me that no one conceived of or set up all of that sophisticated engineering inside the cell? That everything randomly fell into place over the course of millions of years? That's what Darwinists believe. To be sure, I've always been a strong believer in evolution, and I still am. But I'm finding that there are limits to evolution. It doesn't explain everything, such as how DNA and protein production originated. It's like saying all the components of that snack cake factory gradually and randomly just fell into the right place over time. A biologist affiliated with the Biologic Institute named Doug Axe recounted a story where in college and grad school he first studied engineering and then switched to biology. He remembers a professor in a lecture hall describing an elaborate control circuit and how the cell turns on and off a chemical called tryptophan. In a very clever way, it switches a suite of genes on if it doesn't have enough, and off if it has enough. Having studied control systems theory at engineering school, he remembers sitting there and being blown away. Quote, "I realized I was looking at the product of engineering. Remarkable engineering." While things like this were given a Darwinian explanation, he didn't find that at all compelling. Scientists have attempted to explain how that happened from a scientific perspective, but based on what I've been reading, their explanations fall woefully short. Just as the Big Bang needed a designer, so did life on Earth. Biologists, including Michael Behe of Lehigh University and Stephen Meyer of the Discovery Institute, are putting out some really compelling stuff on intelligent design. For a good overview of the ideas here, watch the Discovery Institute's DVD series on intelligent design. And if you're willing to get into the nitty-gritty of cell biology, read Stephen C. Meyer's book, Signature in the Cell. Or just check out the website and blog, evolutionnews.org. And then there's the origin of life question. One of the most famous scientific experiments was the Miller-Urey experiment in the 1950s, in which they tried to recreate the primordial soup of the early Earth to see if it would lead to life. It didn't. It only led to some amino acids, which are among the building blocks of life, but are by themselves woefully inadequate to lead to life. Statistically, as detailed in Meyer's book Signature in the Cell, and elsewhere, the odds of amino acids coming together to form functional proteins are infinitely remote. Even Francis Crick, the co-discoverer of DNA and a committed atheist his whole life, recognized this. So did that shake him out of his atheism? No. He proposed that the seeds of life were sent here on a spaceship by some alien civilization. Apart from cosmology and biology, yet more proof of the existence of God, of an afterlife and higher dimensions are near-death experiences, which I don't have time to get into right now, but of which there's vast literature. Father Spitzer has a good discussion of that in a CD. In addition to near-death experiences, there are many reports of other types of mystical experiences, such as seeing apparitions of the Virgin Mary or seeing Jesus in a dream. Former Clinton administration official Kirsten Powers claims she saw Jesus in a dream, in which he said, "Here I am." That prompted her to go from being an atheist to a Christian. You can read more about that in an article she wrote in Christianity Today. So, what does the atheist comedian Bill Maher say about these miraculous or extraordinary phenomena? You may have heard of the website BeliefNet. Well, he has a website called DisbeliefNet, where he mocks believers. The website has the tagline, "You wouldn't believe what people believe." Now here are some extraordinary things that people believe. That some things can go through solid walls, or can be invisible, or can be in multiple locations at the same time, or can travel through time, or can communicate instantaneously with other things that are 1,000,000,000 light years away, or that can exist in many more dimensions beyond our own. Sounds like what we associate with angels and the supernatural, right? Yes, but that also describes quantum physics, which looks at how subatomic particles behave. So if hotshot Ivy League scientists verify that such things happen in the quantum physics world, and they admit they can't explain how it happens, then it's not a stretch to believe that such things happen involving the spiritual world. In fact, given these similarities between quantum physics and supernatural experiences, I'm waiting for the book to come out on the convergence of science and religion. Let me close by recounting a mystical experience described by Whittaker Chambers, which took place in his Baltimore home after coming down his stairs. Now, here's how he describes it in his book, Witness. "Then there came a moment so personal, so singular and final, that I have attempted to relate it to only one other human being, a priest, and had thought to reveal it to my children only at the end of my life. One day I found myself stopped. A voice said with perfect distinctness, 'If you will fight for freedom, all will be well with you.' What was there was a sense that, like me, time and the world stood still, an awareness of God as an envelopment, holding me in silent assurance and untroubled peace." And he later writes, "Henceforth, in the depth of my being, there was a peace and a strength that nothing could shake. It was the strength that carried me out of the Communist Party, that carried me back into the life of men. It was the strength that carried me at last through the ordeal of the Hiss case. It never left me because I no longer groped for God. I felt God. The experience was absolute."